You wouldn't have wanted to see my face the morning I woke up to the news that I had woken up to. In that moment, I felt a rush of doom, horror, and hopelessness rush into the veins of my brainstems that any poor-ass dam would have just shivered in fear towards. The news that I woke up to was none other than the revelation of there not only being a Crash Bandicoot 5, but that it was cancelled. But once I watched this brilliantly put together video by Did You Know Gaming that outlines in great detail what really happened with this game and even Crash Bandicoot as a whole, Activision moved to the tippity top of my list. Has Activision been naughty or nice? Well, certainly not nice. Definitely not nice, especially after what I saw from this video. When I tell you I was not only flabbergasted, but absolutely outraged for all the people that were involved in this passion project, it just became too much to contain. I'm a book in a Sonic storybook series that has so much crap going on that I manifested my own physical being in the real world just to talk about what I took away from this whole situation. And thus, what we're going to chat about today is not only the cancellation of this game, which honestly just looks and sounds incredible, but why the situation these developers had to go through is absolutely disgraceful, needs more attention, and just has to stop. Hello marsupial enthusiasts, I'm RidersDX, and today I'm definitely in the mood to spill more tea than I ever have. I mean, I brought my gallon-sized teacup just for the occasion. But yes, in case you haven't heard, Crash Bandicoot 5 was recently confirmed to have been deep enough in production that we have fully thought out concepts with lots of art and even a little footage to outline what the game could have ended up looking like. This is a result of an embargo for the project lifting, and thus the release of this comprehensive historical piece from Did You Know Gaming that outlines essentially the last 5 or so years of Crash Bandicoot under Activision up to when they were bought out by Microsoft. So I suppose before I get into the title of this video, I do want to take a moment to actually go through what we learned about Crash Bandicoot 5, because knowing what we were ultimately deprived of will likely help you understand where I'm coming from later on in this video. So Crash Bandicoot 5 began development a little bit before Crash 4 It's About Time release, and it went through a couple of huge conceptual ideas that both honestly sound amazing. The first idea this video goes through is a game that would have taken a lot of inspiration from Crash Twinsanity. If you've been a fan of this channel for a while, you may know that Crash Twinsanity is my first and favorite game of the franchise, so we are already cooking something delicious. Anyway, this game would have taken Crash to the Academy of Evil, which would have been completely revamped for this game as the primary location Crash would have been at. The game would have involved Crash encountering tons of classic villains at the school who all would have taught their own classes. I suppose that's what would have consisted of each world in the game, if that makes sense. There's conceptual art of villains such as Pinstripe and Tiny Tiger as to what their bosses could have looked like. I think this concept sounds amazing. Crash is a franchise that's known for having so many great villains in its roster, and this truly would have been a great setup to take advantage of that illustrious cast. But now let me bring you into the super deluxe sized kitchen the developers cooked their other idea in, the one you've likely heard more about at this point, and that is a full-on Crash and Spyro crossover. Yes, this key art you've likely seen floating around is actual conceptual art from the development of this game. The synopsis of the plot would have involved Uka Uka returning to wreak havoc as he would have invaded Spyro's dimension to recruit some of the most powerful dragons of his world to take over both Crash and Spyro's homes. And thus, Crash and Spyro would team up as you played through Crash-styled levels through Spyro's worlds, and potentially vice versa to take Uka Uka down. While the gameplay aspect in terms of who you'd play as and how that worked wasn't fully conceptualized, the overall plot and setup certainly seemed far along, and I have to say, this would have been amazing. For as much as Crash and Spyro are linked, they really deserve a proper crossover that takes advantage of both of their worlds effectively, and this sounds exactly like that. I still hope they would have been able to loop in the Academy of Evil in some way, but regardless, this is something truly devastating to me because, well, this would have been one of the greatest Crash games to have ever come out. I know it would have been, because it's easy to tell just how passionate Toys for Bob were about this project. But unfortunately, we do have to leave Fairy World at some point because obviously none of this ever came to fruition. We now live in a world where Activision is no longer a thing and Toys for Bob is now an independent developer. So what exactly happened that resulted in this game being canned? Well, let me boil the pot because this is where shit gets real. To at least understand the perspective of the higher ups that went and canceled this project, let's rewind a bit and take a look at the game that really is to blame for all this even being a possibility, the Crash Insane Trilogy. As of this year, this this remaster/remake, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, collection crossed the 20 million global sales mark. And that is an insane number to fathom, especially for a franchise as mismanaged as the Crash Bandicoot series. So you would think with such massive success, Activision would have been more than willing to greenlight some ambitious Crash Bandicoot projects, right? Well, in their defense, they did, and that was Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. Crash 4 is certainly one of the biggest and most comprehensive games in the Crash franchise, with hours and hours of gameplay stuffed into this package. A full-blown narrative is also here, with unique and original level environments. It is essentially the dream Crash Bandicoot game fans have been dying for since, honestly, Crash Twinsanity. And well, the game in my eyes is very good and honestly gets a little too much flack for its completion downsides, because the core experience is still very good and you don't have to complete every fucking game you touch. I mean, we may have seen how that's driven some people over the cliff, but well, according to an employee, Crash Bandicoot 4 ended up selling 5 million units. While not anywhere near the success of the Insane trilogy, this is still a very successful title, especially for a 3D platformer in this day and age. Not according to Activision though. Oh no. Nope. Activision was reportedly very disappointed with the sales of this game, and as a result of this, canned Crash Bandicoot 5. And this is where I lose my goddamn mind! 5 million units is nothing to scoff at. You know how much I would kill for a 3D Sonic game to sell that much? I don't know how much Crash 4 actually cost for development, but certainly 5 million copies should not be a number low enough to essentially can any significant project. At least they should have negotiated a smaller scale project or something. I really do recommend you check out this video because it does go into excruciating detail about the conditions Toys for Bob was subject to due to the absolute horrific management that Activision ensued. But to do a quick Spark Notes thing, because of this allegedly low sales number, Toys for Bob's projects were not only either cancelled or extremely reduced in scope, but over half of their team was let go in a span of a few years. The stories this video goes through on the hardships of some of these developers is very unfortunate reality check on the state of the gaming industry and how these layoffs we keep hearing about truly impact the lives of the people that make the games that we love. And it's super upsetting to me. But this particular situation really struck a chord in me, and not just because I'm a huge Crash Bandicoot fan, but the conditions this game was canceled under and the impact it had on this great developer is just not okay. And to me, the absolute icing on this putrid cake is the fact that Activision themselves eventually got bought out by Microsoft. I don't know the exact reasons Activision sought this out, but it is somewhat likely that Activision themselves were not going to last much longer on their own. I wonder why. Perhaps it was terrible management? Because I have to say, from what I'm seeing here, Activision truly mismanaged Crash in this case, and now who the hell knows when Crash will ever make a comeback. What I truly see as the main problem with how Activision handled this, besides the consequences it inflicted on the developers, is how much they operate on the sense of instant gratification. If they put out a game that doesn't sell ridiculous numbers, they cancel anything like that and pool their resources into games they think will get them those profits, which is why a bunch of Toys for Bob's teams were relegated to assisting in the development of Call of Duty and Overwatch. And my friends, you cannot manufacture overnight success. I have the perfect way to illustrate the realities of making something that comes off as an overnight success, but you're gonna have to stick with me because it's gonna look like I'm going a little cuckoo. I'm just going to tap into my pop culture obsessiveness for a moment and tell you a little tale about an artist you may have seen popping up in a very short and sweet manner. Miss Sabrina Carpenter is a pop artist who in the past week or so came out with her 6th studio album. This woman has been grinding and putting out music for over a decade, but do you want to know something? This will be her first album to not only hit #1 on the charts, but also be her first album to even chart within the top 20. And this year, she also earned her first #1 single of her career. The closest she ever came to that before was placing some nonsensical song in the 50s. So why am I bringing my current musical obsession into the conversation right now? Well, besides the obvious, I feel this quirky little Carpenter illustrates exactly what I mean when it comes to overnight successes. It takes work and dedication and consistency to craft and maintain any entity in the entertainment industry that is going to sell record-breaking numbers with every single entry. And even then, sometimes the sales are not going to match the peak of what you may have accomplished accomplished, and that is nothing to scoff at. Do you think Sabrina Carpenter would be out here scoring #1 albums and singles if they gave up on her after that first album because it only attained a fraction of the success she's seeing now? Of course not. She kept going and going despite lackluster numbers and performance, and her hard work and dedication over years and years is finally paying off. Now, I understand the Crash Bandicoot situation is a little different, but my point definitely still stands, and let me tell you why. Let's focus on the N. Sane Trilogy here. You ever wonder why the Crash N. Sane Trilogy sold as much as it did? Because we have to remember that this wasn't some brand new out of nowhere title that just suddenly showed up on Activision's doorsteps and sold 20 million copies. No, this was a remake of games that, while when they came out, were received very well and successful, as time went on and the series got older and older, people began to appreciate this trilogy of titles more and more. Time is the ultimate truth teller, and thus with the passing years and the unfortunate titles that didn't quite live up to the originals, people grew to love and miss these games more and more the further we got away from them. So when they announced that fateful day the Crash N. Sane Trilogy was a thing, everything was set. As long as they didn't screw it up in a major way, this collection would become a home run success. But the Crash N. Sane Trilogy wouldn't have done that well if it came out say 10 years earlier. Crash just wasn't around long enough to stimulate that sort of legacy. So my point with this is the N. Sane Trilogy benefited from Crash being a legacy franchise that built up enough goodwill to aid him in a big way decades later, aka not an overnight success. But now let's talk about Crash 4, It's About Time. Like I said earlier, this game still managed to sell 5 million copies, which, okay, we can admit that's a far cry from the 20 million the N. Sane Trilogy moved, but it certainly still shows the potential that's there for Crash, and that if you stayed consistent and put out quality titles regularly, perhaps Crash Bandicoot could move more units in the future. If we take a look at Mario, for instance, it feels like Mario has always been a mega successful franchise, but did you know some of his best-selling games actually came out on the Switch? The reason for that is because Mario has built up so much goodwill over the past near half century that consumers are much more likely to buy a Mario game without much thought because they know that it is going to be a quality title. This is not a luxury Crash Bandicoot has, and it's also something he's going to continue struggling with, unfortunately, due to these actions. Crash Bandicoot may have had a good start with Sony, but once he began hopping around publishers and developers, Crash's output suddenly became very inconsistent quality-wise, and people became much more aware of that within each successive game. So while the N. Sane Trilogy did as well as it did, it makes sense that people weren't immediately sold on Crash 4 simply because the last original Crash game was not exactly highly received. You want to take a guess how much of this period of Crash's history was under Activision's control, by the way? Activision never treated the series with the respect it deserved unless it was churning out unreasonable numbers. And well, the N. Sane Trilogy somehow managed to beat the odds and become a home run success, only for Activision to raise the bar ridiculously high for the series and then consider a 5 million selling game a failure be big enough to cancel any somewhat ambitious looking game going forward. It is no wonder Activision eventually fell and got bought out by Microsoft. This is a company notoriously known for horrible management of its properties and employees. So where does that leave us? Unfortunately, I'm not really sure. We'll have to see what happens when it comes to Crash and Spiral under the Microsoft helm, but I can't say my hopes are high based on the similar things I've heard about Microsoft's management strategies. But I will say, if there's one thing I want to put a spotlight on with this video, it's that the way that Activision treated Toys for Bob, especially in their final years, is absolutely atrocious. And I really felt for all those developers watching that video and really getting an inside look at what it was like to work for Activision during these years. I'm glad Toys for Bob is at least independent now and can manage themselves in a way that hopefully is far more fair and stable. I also hope that the industry continues to push for better working conditions. And also, I hope certain publishers just have a more realistic outlook on their properties because, again, an overnight success doesn't exist. You have to invest and be consistent to create what looks like an overnight success, and that's that. Will Crash Bandicoot ever get back on his feet? I don't know. I really hope he does. I know Toys for Bob is working on something for Microsoft allegedly. It might be Crash themed, it might be Spiral themed, who knows? But I just felt really upset about the situation and really felt it was important to put a spotlight on what's going on in this industry. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this dose of me espresso. Let me know in the comments what you think about the situation. Do you agree with my points? Do you disagree? Would you have wanted to see this Crash Bandicoot 5 come to life? Let me know. And also, subscribe to this channel for more interesting discussions like this because I feel like I'm on a roll. I'm cooking in the kitchen right now. I've got things warming up in the oven. I've got things simmering in the pot. I've got dishes being washed in the sink. I mean, you can name it all. But thank you all so much, everyone. This is Riders, and I'm riding out.